My name is James Baldini, and I'm running for Congress in the 5th District as a Republican.
All right.
So I'm glad that you're all here. I want to thank, first off, Hampton Diner for taking us in last minute. I appreciate that. Thank you all for finding the new venue. My name is Jim Baldini. I've lived in this county my entire life. I lived in the district my entire life. This is my first venture into politics. As many of you probably know or know about me, I'm a school teacher. I spend most of my days in the classroom working with students, working with families, on the front line of helping them, helping families. I've decided that what I've been seeing going on down in Washington is something that we can't have anymore. We have to stop it. And the guy who's representing us now is simply not the person we need. I will say that he has lied to us on several occasions. He continues to lie to us. Josh Gottheimer is not the man for the job. I am that man for the job. So I want to start off, who am I? Now, I told you I grew up in this district. Like I said, I've lived my entire life here. I work here. I'm not just been a teacher. My entire life has been dedicated to service. I worked, prior to working as a teacher, I worked with families in the youth shelter. I worked with families at the local ARC. I've worked with teenagers in distress. My entire life I've been a CASA worker. I have done things throughout my life to be a service to the community. So this to me is just another step in that growth of helping out my fellow neighbors, my students, current and former, their families. I know for me, I've seen so many of our students leave the state to go to another state that's cheaper. And I tell you, this is one of the lies that Josh likes to tell. He likes to say it's because of the SALT deduction. He likes to blame President Trump for the fact that the SALT deduction is forcing families out. That's a lie. The reason why people are leaving the state has nothing to do with the SALT deduction being removed. It has to do with too damn high taxes in this state. Too much regulation, too many times, thank you. Too many times I've seen families leave and their words are, I can't afford to live here. Now, to me, they say, well, I've seen people ask, what do you plan on doing about that? You're going on the federal level. What you need to do as the person representing the 5th District is you need to help get elected those people who are going to change Trenton and Washington. The problem is New Jersey doesn't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. So does the United States government. It has a spending problem. Our taxes for the federal government are too high. And we need to change that. So I mean, listen, there's three different areas that I want to talk to you. I could talk all night. And I mean, seriously, I just got interviewed from Straight Talk, Aaron, and you saw my interview there. I could have spent the entire night with him answering his questions, and it would be clear and precise. What you got to remember is I am just the ordinary guy. What makes me different than everybody else out there, what makes me different than any of my opponents in the Republican side and on the Democrat side, is I am not a politician. I'm not a banker. I'm not a lawyer. I am a school teacher. I am one of you. And listen, I speak plainly. I got a speech in my hand. I'm not using it. Why? Because this isn't from a piece of paper. This is from the heart. I don't need to look at the paper in order to tell you how I feel. What I think, what I feel, that's coming from in here. You're not going to get that from everybody else. It's called genuine communication. Our president does it, I do it, and I'm going to continue to do it just like he does. Why? Because I'm tired of the lying pomposity of the politicians out there. They lie to us to our face, and then they go down to Washington and they just do something completely different. They buy out, they sell out. I'm not a sellout. I'm only doing 3 terms, folks. I'll do a 4th if there's a Democrat in the White House. But I do 3 terms because I want to come home to being a teacher. That's what my mission is. That's what my mother's mission was. That's what I'm going to be, an educator. I'm going to be working with families. When I get done, I'm going back to the classroom. Why? Because that's my mission. We need citizen candidates. We need to get rid of the politicians. And the best way I can do that is to be an example like I am to my students. We have to stop this. We send these people down there, it's like there's some kind of like a bubble that they travel through. When they get down there, they turn into some lying person who they weren't like before. I'm well grounded. When I come home every day, I'm not like them. I don't know what their lifestyle are, but I'll tell you what mine is. I come home, I have 2 disabled kids. My son, he's on the spectrum. He's a wonderful young man. My daughter, she's a wonderful young lady. She was 21 years old when she got something called autoimmune encephalitis. She changed her entire life. She's disabled now. But what she went through, the trouble, the sacrifice, she's still struggling 6 years later. And I got to tell you, one of the things that caused that to happen, she relapsed after she had gotten better. She ended up in the socialist hospital system of New York City. When you do that, by the way, you lose complete control. Absolute no control over what happens to your family member or to you. She didn't want to be there, but they kept her against her will for 75 days. They medically kidnapped her. New York City system is run by the mayor of the city. He sets the agenda. He sets the bill. He's the one who organizes it. It's on him. It's a socialist healthcare system. I come home to that, to what came out of that system, to the devastation that was done to my daughter. It's been 4 years since she came out of there, and she's just starting to recover. She's had to get treatment after treatment after treatment. And she's at the point where she might be getting better soon. But the damage they did is something that's caused by a system that doesn't care about you. That's what socialism is. To them, they wanted to keep her, they did. The only reason why they let her go is because the insurance cut out. Friday afternoon, they said they're keeping her for 6 months. Saturday, the insurance company said to us in a letter, canceling the insurance, we don't think they're treating her the right way. Monday morning, they called us to tell us to come get her. This is the system that we need to fight. Don't tell me there's not going to be death panels. They're going to have those because that's their plan. They pretty much, Nanny Bloomberg just said that, 95 years old, cut off. You're not getting any more care. I mean, I think he's probably the bravest man in the country, though. He wants to have Hillary as his VP. I mean, that's pretty brave, man. But he's not the brightest, that's for sure. Seriously, we are at the tipping point. We are at a tipping point in our country. Our president has shown us the way. Lower taxes, less regulation, fighting our competitors across the seas, forcing them back from the jobs that they're stealing. Listen, for the last 50 years, we've allowed them to steal our jobs. They've taken our jobs to have them in some kind of low level to let, in essence, create slave labor in a foreign market. They're making people pay paying them nothing to work. And we have great workers here. The best workers in the world is the American worker. No one can beat them. And we allowed those jobs. I'm sorry, we did. We, the average people, did. The politicians allowed that to happen. Left and right. And we need people who can say that. People who aren't afraid to say, yes, both parties are responsible. 50 years, $23 trillion in debt. The border has just now starting to get taken care of. Why? Because of our president. We see these changes happening. He needs people down there not stabbing him in the back, but covering his flank. I'm that guy. I'll cover his flank because he needs it, because our country needs to be saved. My father back in the 80s, he worked as a research engineer down at Picatinny. His entire life was devoted to fighting communism, fighting statism. He spent his entire life fighting that. And I feel like he trained all of my brothers and my sister and everyone else he came in contact to help fight that. This is my mission now too. Just like my mother's mission as an educator I carried on, it's now my time to carry my father's mission to fight back the statists who are continuing to push over and knock our president down. They're still going to come after him. And just remember, it's not a joke when they say when they get through him, they're going to come for us. We're next on their list. We're the rubes, we're the dummies, we're the deplorables, we're the ones they don't trust. That's us. That's not going to change because they win. It's just going to give them more power. And we have to make sure we win. And the only way we're going to win houses in the seat is if we have genuine people who stand up and take a stand. The ordinary person. Not somebody who can influence peddle with their money. Listen, we know what influence peddling looks like. We see it in Andy Bloomberg. He spent $400 million so far. $400 million to get 15% up in the polls. That's influence peddling. Plain and simple. Anybody who's spending their money like that, they're doing it for a reason. They're not doing it because they want to help. They're doing it because of their own agenda. See, you and I, we don't have an agenda except for America first. We want to take and make sure our country is safe. We don't want to see it damaged. So I mentioned that I was going to talk about three things. And I know I kind of talked about them. Healthcare, we don't want socialism, socialized healthcare. I'm a big advocate. I want to deal with student debt. We see these poor kids graduating college with $100,000 in debt. Yet, take that same 18, 19, 20-year-old, take them down to the bank to get a loan, and they'll be denied. But we'll give them a $100,000 note for their college education. Where does that make sense? You know why? Because there's some type of system where the bankers are making the money off of that. I know it's like bankers are reinforcing the federal government when it comes to student loan debt. Who do you think is underwriting it? The federal government is the company is who's underwriting it, but who's underwriting the federal government? The bankers. So don't sit there and think it's going to fix itself. These kids are right to be concerned. And let's talk about their education. What kind of education are they getting in these institutions? You know, New Jersey is #1 in the country. Our education, and I'm talking K to 12, #1 in the country. But I think we're 39th for math in the world, 24th for science and reading. That's despicable. And you know why? And I have a little pet peeve on this. It's because politicians tell us how to educate our kids. We got great teachers. Teachers who are going through 6 years of college, sometimes 7 years of college to get their degrees. And yet we have politicians telling us what to teach. They're telling us how to teach it. If you walk into a regular school, you will see, plain and simple, you have to be on this date, you have to be here, on this date you have to be there. And if you're not, as a teacher, you get in trouble. 100 years ago, we were teaching kids mastery. The 7th grader teaches the 6th grader because the 7th graders mastered it. And you know you mastered it because you can teach it. It's simple, logical thinking that educators knew 100 years ago. And the politicians who are telling us how to do it today are destroying our education system from the K to 12 and in the higher levels in college and the university. It needs to stop. And what we need is somebody who's going to advocate for that. We can force, and one of the things I strongly suggest is we get the colleges to underwrite, co-sign these loans for these students. Make them partners with the student. Because then all of a sudden, when they're partners with that student, they're responsible for paying it if the student doesn't have the job. One statistic is back in the 70s. Remember the 70s, for those of you who are old enough to remember, the 70s were the economy was on a downturn, giant inflation. Carter was running around with a sweater vest saying, "Lower your heats." Remember that? I don't know. For those of you old enough to remember that, I remember that. And I'll tell you, the 1% is what the college-educated taxi drivers were. So 1% of people who are driving taxis were educated at the college level. Today it's 15%. So that means that colleges are graduating kids that can't find jobs because we're forcing kids to go to college, kids who probably shouldn't go to college, who would do better in a trade school. We need to increase our trade schools. We got a great one here in Sussex Tech. We got great ones all throughout the state of New Jersey. But they're not #1 priority. So who am I? I'm James Baldini, and I'm running for Congress in the 5th District. I'll be glad to take questions because you know what? The guy I'm running against, he wouldn't take questions from you. He's afraid of you. I'm not. I'm not afraid of my citizens. Yes, I'm a big Second Amendment. Let me throw that in too. I'm big on the Second Amendment because I trust my fellow citizens. I trust my fellow Americans. So, anybody have any questions? Because I'm willing to answer them. Nice, silent crowd. Did I answer any questions? Am I that genius? Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You did a great job of highlighting all the problems. Like we're well aware of all the
Yes.
problems out there. Okay. But what would be your specific priorities? Take healthcare. You know, what are your ideas for that? You know, because we seem to be having a lot of focus on what the problems are, but the ideas on what to do and how to do it and how to get through the mess that's down there in Washington right now, that's the problem. So what are your ideas for helping, you know, all Americans, preferably citizens and legalized immigrants, to have decent, affordable, and reliable health care?
Do you have a cell phone?
Yep.
How many people have cell phones in the room? 20 years ago, I remember back in the 90s, we didn't have cell phones. I mean, we did, but people who were really wealthy had them in their cars, right? The reason is because there wasn't enough service, but it was also very, very, very expensive. The reason why is because a whole bunch of things. The plans stunk. If you roamed, it was a fortune. Today, we have a great infrastructure in our healthcare system. There's a connection to the phones, trust me. You all have phones today because a bean counter came along and came up with this great plan for you that works for you, and then there's another plan that works for somebody over here, there's another plan that works for somebody over there, but there's millions of people who are on that plan. And they've attracted them. The reason, when you look at healthcare as a giant market, we've stifled that growth by forcing people into these little boxes. Now, you should be able to take your health insurance anywhere you want, but you can't. The reason why we stifle them is because we're getting our employer to be the one to give us our insurance. So if you go to X company and there's 10 people in that company, you may not have great insurance, but the company that's got 10,000 people is going to have better insurance. But if you open it up to the broader market, to everybody in the entire country, there's 300 million people in this country. People who have major illnesses like my daughters, and people who really don't need it, much healthier than I have been in 30 years. So those are the people that you may not want the heavy duty insurance that I need. I need the heavy duty insurance for my daughter. They should be able to have, there would be a plan. We need to get our president, and I think he'd be on board with this because this is a complete free market type of solution. A free market solution where you get to decide what you want for your insurance. Not your employer, because the employer isn't looking at what you need. The employer is looking at their bottom line. What can they meet everybody's needs to keep you healthy? Not your kids necessarily, not your grandkids, not anybody. But then that plan you can have with your husband, you can have with your daughter, anybody you want to be a part of that plan, just like you can with your cell phone. See, that kind of market plan is the plan that will work for everybody. Because it's a plan that spreads out to the entire country. Is it perfect? No, I'm sure there's a lot of pieces of it that need to be cleaned up. But for the rough and ready answer on this, it's the best that we can manage for our country. Because socialism is going to do what they did to my daughter. And that's that, if you go for the Medicare for all, that's what that is. It's going to set a little plan that everyone's going to be forced into. You go with something like Obamacare, I have to pay for a pregnancy test. I'm never going to be pregnant. That's just, this is the kind of thing that we'd have to pay for. But under the plan that you would need, you could get what suited your needs as an individual or as a family. Does that answer your question?
In a way, but I have a follow-up if you want to take it.
Well, I mean, but if I could just, the way I would say it is, this is not something that I can do alone. This is something that I have to convince people. I'm very persuasive when I want to be. So go ahead, follow.
But the cost and delivery of healthcare in different areas of the country will be different. I mean, to create a nationalized market where premiums are going to be the same nationally, like that would never work.
Well, the insurance companies don't want it to work because the thing about this is it takes the power out of the insurance company, puts it in your hands.
Right, but the cost of delivering services in New York City is very, very different than the cost of providing services, say, in some small town in the middle of the country. Okay, so you, I agree that it's possible to maybe start with regionalizing it, so that people who are in certain regions of the country can have equal access and choice of plans, etc. But I think a nationalized, everyone can buy whatever they feel they need, I think is kind of far of a reach of an idea.
I didn't say it was perfect.
No,
And you
that's why I said partial.
just by your statement alone, you've made, now I like the idea of regionalization. I like that. I mean, depending on, you found a hole and you found a solution. A lot of people just find a hole, they don't try to find a solution, so thank you. You said follow-up, did you do your follow-up?
No, I was going to add to that.
No, did you have your follow-up?
That was my follow-up, that I think a national approach towards meeting everyone's needs, where needs are different in different areas of the country, whether you call them regions or even localized, I'm a fan for localizing everything. Education, medical, insurance, everything, because
we don't have control right now.
Smaller areas to control and manage and know what your current population needs, wants, values. The values change different areas of the country. I mean, people's values are different. I'm a fan for as local as possible, deliver all of those types of services by the people who need them and are accessing them.
Excellent.
There you go. Take that to Washington.
I will. We're glad to take it to Washington. I'm not afraid to make the fight. I can definitely do the fight.
I was just going to make a comment that, all right, how many times are you watching television and you see a Geico commercial, a Liberty Mutual commercial, a blah, blah, blah commercial? All these insurance companies are buying for your car, your health, your auto, and guess what? It works. Why can't that happen in true health insurance? You know what I mean? So, point being, there's a reason to make it a giant market because it works. So, I mean, we still pay the most car insurance in the country. Like, what, 10 years ago, it was spiraling so far out of control that it was like you couldn't afford to have a car anymore. But guess what? Competition settled it down. And we go out to bid all the time for our car insurance, I've had a couple of accidents. They still want me. Who would have thought, right? So, point is, it can work.
Free market is the conservative idea.
Right.
So, excellent.
So, there are answers out there. We're Americans. We can figure them out. We have the right people. That's it.
Buggy
Firmly
whips.
believe that.
How many people in this room own buggy whips? And the answer is almost nobody, right? Zero. And the reason is because we don't drive around in buggies anymore. We drive around in cars.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
One issue that I bring up, because no politician wants to bring it up. We have a lot of establishment politicians that go in a cushy state or district that's deeply Republican or deeply Democrat, and we can't get them out. They go, they do corrupt things, and they sit there for years. For example, Bob Menendez was up on corruption charges. We thought we had a great candidate who served his country, and he lost in a landslide. So, but because they're in a cushy district, they don't want to match up term limits. So I think it's an issue that we need to address.
Definitely for term limits, like I said before. And I think one of the things that we have to do as Americans is we have to, and as the guy who would hold the seat for the 5th District, is I would be campaigning against him. We do get cushy. People do get cushy, soft jobs, and they don't want to step out of their zone. It's not my area. I'm not supposed to go over there. But I'm willing to travel all over the state. When I get this position, I'm willing to do it. I've already done it to help out candidates who are running for office in the legislative role. We need to reach out and help these people. People who meet our values, who match our values, and want to help out and change the way things are done in Trenton and in Washington, D.C. Because, listen, Trenton's just as screwed up, if not more so. This is the model. California and Trenton is the model that they want to turn Washington, D.C. and the rest of us into. And our credit rating is dropping. We are struggling in our own state to keep people here. People are fleeing the state. There's a reason for it. And the only way we're going to turn that around is if we get the people out there who are destroying it and change them. And we need people who are willing to stand up to them. Because it's not easy. People call you names. They take you, they try to give you a hard time. They find every bit of dirt they can on you. But to me, I mean, I mentioned my daughter. The part that I didn't mention is every night I go home. In fact, before I left, she gave me a kiss on the cheek. Everything is fine. It doesn't matter what happens to me because at the end of the day, I go home and she says, "Hey, Daddy, how you doing?" Because that's where you need. If you don't have that center in here, it doesn't matter how much you fight. You're going to lose eventually. It's going to wear you out. You need to have some place where you can go that's your safe space. And that's my family. And I know a lot of people may have that, but you don't go through what I went through with my family, and if you don't find some place to manage your anger, your upsetness. If you can't manage that, you can't run for politics, because they're going to do and say everything they can to make you angry, push your buttons. It's a good question. Thank you. There's got to be more questions in the audience than that. No more questions? Well, then I want to thank you all for coming. I appreciate you being here. We have penne pasta, club sandwiches, salad, and I think there's nachos back there somewhere. So please dig in, eat well. Thank you again.